Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, here with a special final episode of the Best Actress series where I'll be answering your questions and wrapping up the series overall. And I didn't want to do this alone, so I've invited one of my favorite guests to join me to have a discussion in honor of the completion of this series. He's been heard on not one, not two, but three Best Actress episodes covering 1950, 1983, and 2014, not too long ago. Founder and editor-in-chief at AwardsWatch, the Elizabeth Sparkle to my Sue. Welcome back, Erik Anderson.
I think at 4, that makes me the Katharine Hepburn of And the Runner-Up Is. So
how about that? But unlike her, you've shown up every time. So
exactly.
I appreciate you for that. But yes,
really
it's true.
Point.
The rumors are true. I did crawl out of your back and, become the awards expert.
It is true, and it's something I've been fighting with for quite some time. So, it just means that I'm going to have to kill you at some point.
It's fine. We'll have a knockout drag-out fight. It'll be, You'll be bald by then, so.
Exactly.
I don't know. Anyway, what a fun way to start. Let's just get right into it here. So, like I said, rather than sort of talking to myself, I wanted to have this conversation with, one of my faves, because you've always been so good at contextualizing these things and, looking at the broader picture. So you've always been a very good interviewer too. So, I'm going to sort of let you take over the reins here and allow you to ask whatever you want as we wrap up this series. And then we can get into some of the more specific questions that I've already given to you as well that the listeners have submitted. So yeah, let's get right into it. What do you want to know?
Well, I mean, obviously, we can't start without telling you and congratulating you on just the gargantuan feat of this series and the previous as well. You just have to look at the threads on Instagram and on Twitter that are absolutely just giving you the credit and the love that you deserve for this. It's very, she's got a point. She's an icon. She's a legend. She is the moment. And
oh, brother.
and that basically, like, succinctly says kind of what everybody it has really thought about this and just how much love and appreciation and affection and respect has come your way for this show, both from people that have guested on it and just listened to it. It's, and I've told you this is not even close. This is my favorite show. It's, I love your thoroughness. I love your passion. And, that's just something as a fellow in this that I will always appreciate and I will always love.
Well, I do appreciate that, Erik. You've always been very gushing in your praise of me, and I'm always like, do I really deserve all that? I don't think so, but I really do appreciate it, and I do think the best part of this whole process has just been connecting with people, really, and kind of using this as a gateway to have 3-hour conversations about Best Actress, because there's no better topic in the world, right?
There really isn't. And we will get deep into that.
Yes.
But I want to ask, I'm going to go like back.
Okay.
Where your love of Oscars began. Was there a year or a race that became a definable and solidifying moment for you?
Well, there's kind of two, I would say. One is just kind of like the getting my feet wet, which was the 2003 The Lord of the Rings year, because that was such a big movie. Obviously I saw it was just very exciting for me to see that movie do as well as it did, even though like I'm not even really like a big sci-fi fantasy type of person to begin with, but at the age of 13 I felt like, oh my god, this is so cool, my taste has been validated, kind of. So that was one thing. I also remember this is kind of probably telling, but I made like a newsletter at the age of 13 of just like my favorite, just like entertainment news, basically, and just like gave it to my family and being like, look what I did. And I remember one of them literally having a headline with "The Lord of the Rings sweeps the Oscars." So, yeah, that was a taste of my childhood, I guess.
I love that so much.
Yeah,
I
I
love
was
it so much.
impossible. But just like thrusting my, you know, random things on my family. But the real, like, getting really into it was 2006, which is another, like, weird thing because I was into The Office and I
Oh,
loved Steve
wow.
Carell. And
Okay.
that led me to check out Little Miss Sunshine because he was in that. And I was like, okay, let's see him do a more dramatic role like this. And I just absolutely fell head over heels for that movie when I saw it. And I remember watching the Oscar nominations announcement and being so unbelievably excited when it got into Best Picture because like I had no idea like what precursors were even when at like 16 I must have been at that point. But just seeing that was like, oh my God, it's another like taste validated kind of moment for me. And then that just kind of spiraled and I started following it deeper and deeper as it went along until the point that here we are.
Here we are. Um,
Yeah.
your podcast began working through the nearly 100 years of Best Picture before turning your attention to why we're all really here, actresses.
Yes.
Why
That was
are
just
the
the warm up, right?
It really was. It
Getting my
was
feet
really
wet.
just to get there. Why are the Oscars and especially Best Actress important to people like us?
And when you say people like us,
You can
you
take
mean
that
okay,
however you want, alphabetically, whatever you
sure.
want.
LGBTQ are important letters in this discussion, perhaps. I don't know.
Exactly,
But
maybe.
I don't know. I mean, that's something I've weirdly been wrestling with for a while now in terms of even having debates with people about why the Oscars are important and why they matter because they tend to be dismissed quite often by people who aren't into it. I just think they give us kind of this like culling of even though they're not the objective best, they just allow for a greater discussion of film in a way that is an easy access point, I think, for people. And, you know, for actresses, I mean, that's been something that's really been a thing from the beginning, I think, is just kind of wanting more female led stories to be told in Hollywood and just in the world, and kind of validating those stories in an industry that often rejects them and is doing more so, you know, as we get further along in film history, sadly. But yeah, I think that's kind of the basics of it. I mean, I don't know what people love following the horse race of it, of course, and I do too. We always like the day-to-day stuff, but I do think sometimes it is important to remember the bigger picture of you know, just discussing these films and why they matter rather than just like positioning them necessarily.
Yeah, and even then I think, you know, there are so many factors. Just even the simple pageantry of it, I think,
Yes, that's
can
true.
be a
The ritual of it too,
yeah,
you know.
a draw. I mean,
Yeah.
not unlike, you know, Drag Race, honestly. Just
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And yeah, certainly to some letters of the alphabet, there is a lot of, I think, attraction and
Yeah.
allure and fantasy world that we kind of
That's
get
true too.
to escape
Yeah.
into for a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, let's go into the Best Actress series that just
Mm.
wrapped up. And I want to ask what your process is for rewatching films and evaluating them in the lens of now versus the time that they were made. And when you've seen something, I mean, obviously if it's, you know, from 1934, you're not going to have a first time watch in 1934. But how
I
do
mean,
you
you are, but yeah.
I mean,
You
yes,
know, you and Janet Gaynor.
I knew you were going to bring her up.
Sorry.
I
Yeah.
already was going to talk about her later
Yeah.
in my heroes
Mm-hmm.
versus villains list. No.
Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
But yes, when you have something, let's say newer, that isn't a
Mm-hmm.
first time watch and it's a rewatch, how do you evaluate a film and a performance in 2025?
Well, obviously, context is the number one factor because film, even over the course of 100 years, it doesn't seem like a lot, but so much has changed, as we know, in terms of trends and what's allowed in film, the Hays Code, obviously, in the beginning. So, yeah, just kind of remembering the baseline of like, and I actually think it helps to watch multiple performances within a week to kind of give you a good snapshot in a way of the sensibilities of performances and films and weighing those against each other, seeing what performances seem like they're ahead of their time. That tends to be something that I really value, is that something that I can just respond to, even though it came out 80 years ago, as something that's really cool and refreshing, even compared to like today's actors. You know, I always value that sort of thing. It's really just kind of an X factor in many ways because these things are very subjective, as you know, and you know, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And I've gotten even some DMs about people disagreeing with my takes on some performances, which vary in terms of intensity. I'm not going to go into that, but yeah, like I said, it's just very subjective, and it's all about feeling just what the actress is doing in service of the film itself, you know, that sort of thing. So it's really just very difficult to explain because it is so, like, you know it when you see it type of thing.
Sure. Do you also
Yeah.
contextualize it in a given year, like socially, politically, as well
Yeah.
as like other performances that weren't nominated? Because that's something we certainly do now. A lot of that is talk about the snubs and
Mm-hmm.
how did Marianne Jean-Baptiste not get in this year?
Yeah.
Because every year is going to sort of have an element of that. Do you take kind of that into account when you're looking at the nominees that made it?
Uh, Weirdly, not really. I tend to
Good.
just be very narrow focused on the nominees themselves. I mean, obviously, when you look at other performances, you're always going to see things that are more daring that have just held up more because they are more, you know, they seem like they're ahead of their time. Something like a Marilyn Monroe and Some Like It Hot, I think, is a good example of that, where I don't want to pick on Doris Day, but like Doris Day getting in for Pillow Talk and not Marilyn Monroe for Some Like It Hot, I think is very telling of certain sensibilities. But again, I do try to just be very narrowly just looking at the performance as its own thing as much as I can,
Do
even
you
though
what?
everyone's going to have their own bias
Of
going into
course,
stuff.
of
Yeah.
course. Do you watch them in any specific order? Like, do you save the winner for the last few?
Yes, I have done that pretty much not every single year, but since like, yeah, the 40s, I would say. I always try to build up to it. I even try to do something where, like, if I know the dynamics of the race, I'm going to be
Mm,
like, okay, for example, this past year, maybe I'll watch like Wicked first when like Cynthia Erivo probably wasn't in the top three, that sort of
mm.
thing. And then kind of like get up to the runner up, even who I think it might be, and then watch the winner at the end. Because I always am just kind of like trying to, I don't know, it just makes sense to me naturally to build up to the winner, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I think
And
so
also
too.
just to give each performance their own kind of thing rather than, you know, comparing them to the winner the whole time.
Save that for the show.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Were there years that you struggled with in terms of putting the show together, whether it's, I mean, anything, even just being uninspired by the nominees?
Yes, 1984, which is the Save the Farm Girls year, which I had a great time talking with Amy Thomason with. I think that was a really fun episode, but just struggling through that crop of nominees was just a real case of like, do I really need to do every Best Actress year? Like, couldn't I have just skipped at least one or two here? Because that was just bleak. That was just like that was a week where I felt like I'm just straight up doing homework at this point. I'm not even having a good time.
Yeah,
That would be one.
that is. I think there's a handful that I have, was gonna maybe ask that later about like some of the worst years, and that's certainly
Yes.
that's certainly one of them. But
Yeah.
that kind of brings up a question. I do still want to ask more about like your process though, but
Yeah.
we'll sidebar for 1 second in
Hmm.
you bring up that specific year and how kind of weirdly Save the Farm Girls, that was a thing in 1984. Uh
Reagan's
how
America.
Yes, exactly. How do you see like decades or years as trends, or do you see them as a trend? Are the 80s, because they were so primarily Reagan era years, do the movies and even the Oscars speak to that specific decade?
Yeah, I think they did a lot in the 20th century. I don't know how true that is in the 21st century because, as many people have discussed, there isn't as much interest in the Oscars anymore, and there tends to be a little bit of the Oscars just kind of moving into its own niche more so than reflecting a broader anything going on with society. Obviously, we looked to the 40s and we got a lot of, kind of rallying moments for World War II, Greer Garson and Mrs. Miniver, kind of like the avatar, really, of the whole decade, I think. Um, for better or for worse. We can talk about my feelings on Greer later. Um, 60s, obviously, like by the middle of that decade, we're starting to get away from the Hays Code and into things like Faye Dunaway and Bonnie and Clyde and all these super daring, exciting things. So, yes, I've always, or I did look a lot at those trends in the first 6 or 7 seasons, I would say, that felt more relevant. I think maybe just once we got to these more recent years, it became a little harder to really see a broader picture because I'm just kind of in it. All of us are sort of just in it now. So it's hard to say, what this speaks to about today because we don't have that perspective quite yet. So that's why by the end I kind of just didn't talk as much about societal issues and how these performances reflected them because I can sort of see it on a subjective level, but not with full confidence.
Yeah, I think I've kind of come to that as well. When even
Yeah.
just getting to the end of this season, I did my wrap up, and my first opening was like, I don't really like predicting anymore. It's not really, it's kind of like, I'm like, sorry. I mean, I know that's
Yeah.
why you're here. But, after an amount of time, it is and does kind of become more interesting to look at things in the past with that perspective and be able to analyze and talk about it with some level of information and intelligence and
Yeah.
fallout and
Mm-hmm.
what has
Right.
happened since then. I find that much more interesting, which is why a show like this is, I think, so popular and so much fun to do, because it's just easier to contextualize with time.
Yeah. And I do just love the sociological aspect of all of this. I just find it so fascinating because, again, people complain all they want. I do like the game of it. I like some of the pageantry of it too. But I just, most of all, really like how it is just kind of a time capsule of each year, honestly,
Yes,
for better
every
and for
year is its
worse.
own year. It's
Yes, as you
you,
always say.
you have to, if you look at it like that, I think you're on your way of understanding things. It's
Yes.
rather than everything being like, well, this happened, so this is gonna happen. Like,
Yes.
no.
People like to make those kind of things to make sense of all of this. But again,
there's
every year is its own thing, and the
Yeah,
voters are different now than they were even 10 years ago. So,
some fun and appeal to the nonsensical and element of it too, and
yes, embrace the
not.
nonsense.
Yes, absolutely. You don't have to be right with your predictions. You don't have to be a total dingbat and predict something stupid, but
Yes.
no
Let's
names
not get off
mentioned
on track
here.
there.
We're not
Yes.
going to go there, but yeah. Um, I do want to go back into your process though. I mean, just like
Mm.
from the beginning, uh, notes that you take, what your sources are, if it's, primarily internet or if it's Oscar history books, and what is the first thing you do for the next episode?
I mean, Honestly, a lot of what I do is just start with the material, really, just watch the performances. And that is after that point that I start to look further into the context of everything. I will say a great resource for me was newspapers.com, which has a full archive of so many old, like, varieties and, all the stuff from the 40s and 50s, which are not to be found anywhere else online. That is where I got a lot of my very specific details for those kinds of seasons. Obviously, Inside Oscar has been a Bible for so many of us, but
Yeah.
me especially. That's such a great resource, and I was very sad to, eventually get to the end of that when the book cut off at like the 2000s, or the year 2000 for
Yeah.
Inside Oscar 2, and not to have those further things. I don't know if there's an Inside Oscar 3 that could be written by somebody. Just saying. Maybe it's me. I don't know.
Maybe.
But yes, I take extensive notes while I'm watching the films. Sometimes to the point that I have to rewind because I'm just like typing out like a quote or something. And I just like, oh my God, I've lost my place in this movie. I don't even know what we're doing. So yeah, it can take a little bit, but
I love that. I sympathize with that.
yes.
How do you choose your guests?
Oh, yes. Well, that has been difficult. One of the most difficult aspects of this is booking guests, not only to just get them on board, but just to figure out who would be the right fit for each episode. Sometimes when I'm really struggling, I'll just straight up search for like somebody who I have in mind to make sure, like, does this person have like a, knowledge of movies before the 2010s or something?
Mhm.
Because, that can be difficult if they aren't. So, doing a lot of research into people's, interest in certain things. If there's a nominee that I think someone is really passionate about, I'll obviously keep them in mind. I think it's important to, have on people who can speak to a certain perspective more than others, like having Maddie Lucas, for example, a trans critic on the 2005 episode talking about Trans America, or having Isaiah Reeves, who I met through Instagram, on the Halle Berry episode, and him talking very specifically about, the many different nuances of how people kind of consider that win in the culture. I think that is very important and leads to good discussions. Or, ultimately I'll find someone who's just a little bit like having a slightly different perspective than most people, like Baby Clyde, who loves Meryl Streep in The Iron Lady. And I'm just like, well, let's see what he has to actually say about that. Because I know that he loves it, but I want to see what he says. And that was a fun discussion, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. That's great. That's obviously the episodes that I've guested on mostly were because I had some type of either personal connection or just really like straight up advocated for myself for them.
Yes.
And like all of them really. Even 1950, which I know was very controversial for some people when we got to the end of picking. There was some gagging happened.
Yes.
But yeah, I do wonder sometimes too if somebody, including myself, has such a personal connection to something, or a seemingly so, does that even allow them to have like enough separation from it to talk about it?
Well, that's the whole thing, is that all of this is subjective for me.
Yeah.
So, I don't really mind that too much. As long as somebody, I think, can be passionate about something one way or the other, I think that's all that really matters to me. I just don't want a dull episode where we're just kind of not really even passionate one way or the other about it,
I think that's right. I think that's one of the things about your guest choices that have been really good too, is that it's always feels like a counter without being like a political fight. It's just a counter of ideas, and not necessarily the get along gang. So
yeah, I know. Yeah, I think that has been something that I've tried my best to not have it be too much of people just kind of agreeing with each other too much. Like, we do a lot of that, I think, much more than in terms of like fighting necessarily. But I try to have smart people on who can sort of advocate for their positions on certain performances and not just be like a yes man kind of thing.
Yeah. So to that, what have been some of your favorite episodes and why? I mean, no pressure to name my episodes, but also I know where
Sure.
you live, so choose wisely.
Okay. Well, now how do I start this? Um, a lot of them are weirdly just kind of guest dependent. It's not even something that we have to be talking about necessarily. It's just, who do I vibe with best? And I do think, to start with you, I think all of our discussions have been really good. I enjoyed the just classic old Hollywood diva-ness of 1950. That was just really fun. I still will always cherish the moment where I recast Born Yesterday with Cardi B. And you just had no idea how to respond to that.
I'm still speechless.
Yeah, again, I don't know where my mind goes sometimes, but the 1983 was really sweet in terms of you talking about, you know, your childhood and how these performances mattered to you. And even 2014, like, that was really nice with what you said with Julianne Moore. So there, you got your flowers there. Moving
God,
along.
It's almost like I led you with this question. It's
Yes.
so unprofessional.
Yes. The Sophia episodes have been special for me as well. I've loved doing 1974. That was just such a phenomenal year where I truly feel like, you know, any one of those actresses could have won that year and I would have been like, yeah, great. Love it. Great winner, you know? And we had just a really phenomenal discussion there, especially about Jenna Rollins, the late great Jenna Rollins.
Oh, yes.
And like 2006 is another one, like with Murtada, where I just, whenever there's a year where I just love all the performances, it just makes things so much easier to just kind of like have fun with, really. Because I don't always love to be super negative, because I don't know if that makes for the best podcasting necessarily. Maybe it does for some people, but that's not really my style.
Yes. All right. I was going to ask, like, who's your worst guest, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put you on the spot there, Joey Gentili, but
I'll tell you offline.
Okay, perfect. All right, we did kind of peek a little bit into like some of the worst or weakest years of Best Actress. Do you have a couple more that you want to throw out that are kind of bad, either based on the winner, you know, just being not as good as everybody else, or just the overall nominees kind of feeling flat?
Yeah, I think 1963 was not particularly great. That was the Patricia Neal and Hud year. Again, like, I had a great time with Christoph doing that episode, but like, that is not a lineup I am ever revisiting for the most part. I mean, 1994 is certainly not the best. With that, weirdly, I kind of flipped my perspective on Jessica Lange there, which is a win that I always kind of hated. But then watching it again, I'm just like, I'm just going to have fun with this.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. It's a very campy, very, very unserious movie. So I'm just like, I'm just going to embrace the fun of that. So I do find little silver linings even within the bad, because in some ways you can sort of flip the perspective and just kind of have fun with how bad these things are, you know?
Absolutely. It's so funny because I put in parentheses, you know, a handful of years that I have, and I also have 63, 84, 94, and of course 1927, 28 because of fucking Janet Gaynor, because, you know,
I get it. Yeah, it's your own personal beef.
We didn't really start off too well at that first Oscars. Absolutely upsetting and disappointing.
Louise Dresser, whoever you are.
Yes. What are some of the most inspired Best Actress nominations of all time?
As you said that, the only thing I had in mind was Anne Margaret and Tommy.
Amazing.
It's just, like, hasn't happened before, hasn't happened since. one of a kind, spectacular, unique, never been done before. Not afraid to reference or not reference. Rolling around in baked beans. Truly, like, I'm thinking of Demi Moore in the substance in terms of like anything that comes close to what Anne Margaret does there. But in terms of like more serious, like good on you Academy moments, I would say Sigourney Weaver and Aliens would be one, because like that is just not just, but to the Academy's taste, it seems like it would be just a genre performance, but they actually saw the value in what she was doing there. So, anytime the Academy gets out of the biopic industrial complex, I think is an exciting moment, that kind of thing. I mean, genuinely, like this past year was just such a fun lineup that we got, really, in terms of that. Like, again, for as much as you want to say about Carla, like that's a very unique nomination as well.
Yep.
Cynthia Erivo as the Wicked Witch of the West, Mikey Madison, I think, that may be slightly more traditional in terms of the arc, but very bold, very audacious. And then Demi Moore. And the most traditional of them being Fernanda Torres, a Portuguese language performance, I love that the Academy is opening up their minds a little bit in that way.
I love the Anne Margaret mention, because it's one of those, like we were talking about earlier, it feels like it could only have happened in that decade, or very specifically in that moment. It couldn't have happened in the 60s or in the 80s. It just feels like it's right there.
Yeah, a perfect time capsule.
Yep. It really is. And also,
it's 50 years old now.
Yeah. The Weaver year, also having Kathleen Turner and Peggy Sue got married the same year.
Yes, very true.
Incredible.
And also having something like Jane Fonda in The Morning After. It's just such a wild year.
It really is. When I think about Jane Fonda in The Morning After, I sort of have this, she was sort of going to be the Meryl Streep at the time, and just kind of keep going and get in, and then in that just
abrupt ending.
It did not happen for her. Historically, we've only had one time Best Actress. What year or years do you think were the closest to having another?
Okay, well, I don't know if you remember this specific thing. I swear to God, I don't know if I dreamed this or something happened, because I tried to look this up. Was there, or was there not, an Entertainment Weekly article at one point talking about polling like some producer or like accountant within the Academy, saying that there was a difference of like one vote during a Best Actress race of the 2000s?
I'm going to have to look that up. I don't remember.
Well, I mean, I tried to look it up and I didn't get any answers. So
I don't know. I'll find something.
I always assumed that was Marion Cotillard and Julie Christie, but I'm not positive on that. Either way, regardless, that's a whole other tangent. I think, honestly, a few of the more recent years, like Glenn and Olivia, could have been very close in that way. Maybe Emma and Lily. Obviously, Michelle Yeoh and Cate Blanchett seems like the tightest of tightest races there. So those are the ones that are coming to mind at the moment. Harder to know, obviously, with the older ones. But yeah, maybe even like Gwyneth Paltrow and Cate Blanchett in 1998 is possible.
Yeah, I do love those years when things are pretty split amongst precursors and industry, even in the pre-SAG era, which makes all of that so much harder in that sense. I know it's probably impossible to not talk about Meryl Streep in context with this, and there are definitely several listener questions that refer to Streep. So I'm just going to ask a single one, really, that hopefully encompasses them a little bit and isn't really just like a test question. But this is the longest stretch that Streep has gone without a nomination in her entire career. It's 7 years now. Why do you think that is? Do you think she cares? And will she be making a comeback, using that term as loosely as possible?
Well, she hasn't made a feature film since Don't Look Up, which was 2021. So there was no opportunity for her to even come back. She's hanging out with her new soulmate, Martin Short, doing Only Murders. I truly just think she's just in her casual era now. She's just having fun. She's living life. She's having her kind of like Nancy Myers moment of just being like, I've gotten to this point in my life. I'm gonna enjoy things and find love and not really even work as hard as I used to. That I think she's just kind of not coasting, because that sounds like a pejorative, but just having a more relaxed point where she doesn't have anything to prove. Sure, I think she obviously still has it. She could still put in a super impactful, dramatic performance, but she's just not really interested in that right now, unless the right role comes around, such as the long-rumored Joni Mitchell biopic.
I mean, okay. I don't
Right?
know how I feel about that.
I don't know. I think if she ever wants to do anything again in terms of, getting to that place, I'm sure the Academy will respond in kind, but who knows? Maybe the Academy has changed so much that, we just talked about how people like Amy Adams and Kate Winslet and Saoirse Ronan and all these people who were contenders this year who had this legacy in the Oscars were all passed over in favor of newer people. So maybe we're just in a new era. Maybe we're past the Meryl era.
Maybe. Oh, good. I have my next two things are very much about what era we are in right now.
Yeah.
And this was something I was going to ask anyway. And then Miles McHale had a version of this question as well. And so the next two things are really going to be about this last season and what they mean or could mean. So this last season had 5 Best Actress nominees from Best Picture nominees, something that hasn't happened since 1977. Yeah. And even in the last 15 years of this expanded lineup, are we in a golden era of actresses and Best Picture, or is this something that happens where we get excited and then it doesn't happen again for a while?
Obviously very hard to say because we just don't know ever what the lineups are going to be. We don't really even know at this point. It's March and we still have no idea what's going to happen. I fear that it might just be a year-to-year thing and that it is a little bit coincidental, seems like the wrong word for it, but just this is just kind of how things lined up this way, that there just happened to be more female-led stories that spoke to people. I hope that that is a trend moving forward because 9 of the last 10 Best Actress nominees, sorry to Annette Bening and Nyad, lined up with Best Picture. And that's very rare, Obviously, we talked about 2014, like that was a huge flop in terms of discrepancy between Best Picture and Best Actress. So I'm really hopeful for that. I don't know if it is a trend yet because it's only been a few years, but I'm hopeful, It's just really hard to say. Yeah,
it is. It is really hard to say because we've it's been a lot of Lucy and Charlie with the football with the Oscars.
Yeah.
As any follower knows, where the moment that you get emotionally connected to something happening, they're like, nope, we're going to take that away from you or just not give it to you at all.
Don't I know it? Yes.
Yes. And so speaking and continuing from this year, Mikey Madison's win a few weeks ago kind of went back to the Academy's love of ingenues in this category after a recent run of older actresses and repeat winners, or both. Do you think, sort of like the last question, that this is unique to this year, or are we likely going to see a continue or going back to older actresses winning again?
I think every year is different. I'm going to repeat it right back to you.
Excellent.
I just think it's at the point where, because so many older folks have been winning Best Actress, some of us maybe were led to believe that that is just the pattern we are in, is specifically that. But I think the real story is just how much almost all of them lined up in terms of they were in movies that Academy members just loved. And that really rises all tides, really, with everyone else. So, you look at Mikey Madison, obviously Oppenheimer didn't have a Best Actress, but Poor Things was like right up there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Emma Stone, clearly, they love that more than Killers of the Flower Moon, as we know. They loved Everything Everywhere. They love Nomadland. They kind of love The Favorite. They gave it 10 nominations, but, more so than The Wife. And so, I think that there's not a coincidence there, really. It's really just, I don't know if they're getting lazier per se, but it just seems like you just have to be in a movie that people respond to. And that is kind of the biggest hurdle.
Yeah. And I think going back to 2014, which almost feels like, it exists in a bit of a vacuum.
Yeah.
And, as much as obviously I love Julianne Moore, she was very lucky that year.
Yes.
To be up against other first-time nominees or previous winners with movies that had little to zero other nominations, or Felicity Jones, who I think is a pretty, regardless of how I feel about Felicity Jones,
yes,
but it's a real supporting performance
right.
versus a co-lead, and it's just not really, everything, like, we can just keep repeating, every year is its own year, and sometimes that willingness to reward somebody presents itself rather than trying to figure it out the other way, I guess.
Yes, I think that's right. Yeah,
kind of like that. All right, I want to get to some listener questions because there are literally hundreds of them. You don't know which ones I'm going to ask. I have just a handful over here. And some people ask multiple, like Steffi. I love Steffi so much. Like 7 questions. And I have them like all in front of me. And I love all of them so much. I'm like, which ones am I going to ask?
It's a lot.
It's a lot. So I think I will try and, limit to one per person. To be fair.
Yeah.
But yes, go to the thread where everyone asks their questions, look at them, because they're good. I love her very first one though, and that is, how do you judge a performance? Since you've watched so many, how can you tell a good performance from a great one? I love this question.
Yeah, I love it too. I think sort of the test for me is when I feel myself really kind of buying into the character because of what they're doing. And again, it's really just about like the vibe and the style of the film too. Like, Natalie Portman and Jackie, or Kristen Stewart and Spencer delivering those kinds of performances in like a Mike Leigh film wouldn't feel right. But, what I like is that there is no one size fits all approach to this. It is very subjective. So it's really kind of vaguely about like whether I think they have a grasp on the material and are bringing something that feels somewhat unique to them, really.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. The next 2 sort of delve into things that we talked about a little bit, but maybe we can expand on here. And Cody Derricks asks, I'd love to hear you pick a Best Actress winner from each decade that best captures the general feeling, trends, and energy of each decade in film. And Jamie also asked the same question.
Yes, I had a lot of fun, actually. I answered this ahead of time just to make sure I didn't dilly-dally too much on this. Okay, so the 30s for me, I kind of combined 20s and 30s because 20s only had 2 years. 30s is Norma Shearer. Studio system, the queen of MGM, and also she didn't even really continue her career past then. She just seemed like the classic leading lady of that time. I think the 40s is Olivia de Havilland, with a possibility of like Greer Garson too, because of what she kind of did with the whole stiff upper lip thing during World War II. But for Olivia, she was just at the peak in that era, and she created the Olivia de Havilland rule that sort of led to less studio control over stars. So she's very important to that decade. 50s for me is Audrey Hepburn. I just kind of associate her with that decade, and she kind of just represents an ideal that feels very classic 50s to me. 60s is tough because it's kind of like split in 2 halves, really. Weirdly, in that sense, this isn't the first one you might think of, but for me, it's Anne Bancroft, who kind of straddled the line between the sort of tradition, theater, miracle worker stuff, and then the new Hollywood, The Graduate, that sort of thing, and made that transition very well. 70s for me is Jane Fonda without question. Much more urgent, much more raw. She wins twice. She dominates the discourse. So it has to be her. 80s is obviously Meryl. It's just her decade. She gets 6 nominations. She is the new star. 90s is tough because it's like a very blockbuster kind of decade when I think about it, but it's also kind of like a very indie decade at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So weirdly, I'm going to go with like Gwyneth Paltrow. Crowd pleasery, she's an ingenue, and obviously that win kind of represents the rise of the Miramax era that would ultimately kind of change all of this forever, really, for better and for worse. 2000s is Kate Winslet. For me, she just like dominates the decade, and she's way all over the place with her role choices. And I just feel like the 2000s were kind of chaotic in that way, so I gotta have to go with her. 2010s is also tough, but like with how the first 2/3 of the decade went with the Oscars, I kind of have to go with Jennifer Lawrence, who, ingenue, exciting new star, and she just dominated that first half of that decade. And it wasn't even that long ago, but it feels like just another era at this point when you think about it. And then with the 2020s so far, I might say Michelle Yeoh, because there is that slight more embrace of people who've been working for a long time, and more daring kinds of performances being honored. So that's what I came up with. I don't know if you disagree with any of that.
No, it's such an interesting balance of a lot of decades with double winners, some decades with 2 double winners. That's quite a But it was interesting as you got closer to the end, and when you picked Jennifer Lawrence, I was like, well, it's kind of either Jennifer Lawrence or it's Kate Blanchett, because Kate Blanchett sort of felt like she was, or is maybe, taking the mantle from Meryl Streep. Sure. I think she's to sort of reference, I think, at least one question about who could kind of do that and be a double-digit diva. Blanchett seems like the closest and most realistic to that, but
definitely.
Yeah, Lawrence was such an example of the ingenue having the small breakthrough and then the big one to just like a point
and
where she could get in for joy.
Such a roller coaster. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And the overexposure, that whole thing is just, very tumultuous.
Absolutely that. Andy Bayless and JB both ask a similar question. Andy Bayless asked, what would be your, and we talked a little bit about this too, what would be your first 3 best actress vote total years that you'd look at if they ever released? And then JB asked for 5, so you can do 3 or 5.
Okay. Yes. And first of all, I do want the Academy to do this. Just please do it. For my own health, it has to be 2018, Olivia and Glenn. I just gotta know, 1950 is an obvious one. I just really am so curious how the vote totals happen there. Maybe recency bias too, but like, I would love to know this past year's in terms of like Mikey and Demi Moore and Fernanda Torres even. Mm-hmm. I think 2020 is another one. Just the total chaos of that year where everyone had won a precursor except for Vanessa Kirby, just to see like how the vote total spread out there. And then for one more, I would say probably 1988, because again, just curious with Glenn, how close she was for Dangerous Liaisons.
Sort of on the line of that, do you think that, because I don't think they would ever release the totals. I think they said that they had like destroyed them in the past. There was also the fact that the LA Times way early in the Oscars would get the winners beforehand. And that kind of ruined and changed the Oscars forever. We're in the envelope era kind of because of that now. But I mean, personally, I don't think that they will ever release those totals. I think people are just too sensitive. Actors are just too sensitive and fragile of creatures. So much so that they won't even let a person be nominated twice in the same category. They
Right.
just are so scared of that. Uh
Egos. Yes.
yeah, but for the purposes of this, what do you think would be the most realistic format for them to do it? Like 50 years gone by, or does every nominee have to be dead, or what would the what would a realistic process of the Academy be?
Yeah, I think a reasonable amount of time will have to have passed, I would say. Probably 50 years, like you said, would be seem right, you know. Even if not every single nominee is dead, like it's I think it's fine. 'Cause again, it's not like anyone's really being hurt necessarily by that, I don't think. So,
Yeah.
yeah, nothing recent, I would imagine. I never would expect that,
Yeah, I would agree. Because
which is a shame.
there might be, these years that we think are really close and ended up, not being at all. But that's
Right?
kind of the gag of it.
Yeah, that's we love the mystery of it all. Let the
Exactly.
mystery be, perhaps.
Exactly. All right. I have a few questions here before I'm actually just gonna dip into the giant question list and do a
Yeah,
little more just like pin the tail
reading.
on the donkey and like
Yes.
find
Okay.
them.
Okay. Okay.
Uh, Sophia Simonello
Oh God.
as
Go ahead.
inspired by Fritz's funny casting question. Recast any of the Best Actress winning roles with your three-time guests.
Here we go. I hope everyone's listening. Okay, so just to sort of recap my three timers: Sophia, you, Eric, Chels, Fritz, Izzy, Joyce, and Andrew. Those are my three timers. So I'm gonna go in that order. I'm gonna start with Sophia. I'm gonna say Moonstruck.
Oh wow.
Italian. I can picture the fashion. I can see her tearing up at the opera and also telling a man to snap out of it. I can see the vision there, you know.
I love
And it's
that
New
so
York,
much.
right? Yeah. I wanted to get away from like the Faye Dunaway, Diane Keaton thing and go for something a little more inspired. Eric, for you, I am putting you in The Lion in Winter. I just think you have the right sensibility for that, and I'd love to see you in that costume with the wimple, you know.
It's that is actually much closer to my heart and personality than yeah. I don't think I would
Yeah,
accept a tie, but yes.
right. That's true. Fair enough. Um, but right, that seems like you.
I
I
like
almost
it.
went with just being like Shirley MacLaine in terms of endearment, just because I don't know. I just connect you with that so much.
And I deserve it. Okay, I see what's going on. I see the vision of actually
Okay.
both of those. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Chels. I mean, this is a little more like serious, but I can't not see her in the Brie Larson role in Room for some reason. Like, well, obviously we talked about that, me and her, but I just think that would fit really well. I think she has the right vibe for that.
I love that. Actually,
Yeah.
Chelsea could play both Brie Larson and Jacob Tremblay
Wow.
in a one woman show.
Beautiful. I would love
Yeah,
to see it.
yeah.
Um, for obvious reasons, I feel like Fritz has to be a Louise Reiner one. I'm gonna say maybe don't play Asian, and I'm gonna say the Great Ziegfeld. Yeah.
Well said.
Yes. Izzy, I think is a little tough because I struggled with this one a little bit. I don't know why I landed on this, but I'm going with the hours. It just speaks to me. I could just she is a very poetic writer, I think, and I can sort of see the vision there, you know?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Joyce, I don't know how she's gonna take this, but I went with network.
Explain.
She loves TV. She loves the business of it all. And I could just see her really being very assertive, in the newsroom and being like, this is how it has to be done. Because that's just Not that she's like aggressive, but she's very forward with her opinions on things. So I could see that. And Andrew, come back, little Sheba, because it's his favorite Best Actress win, and imagine he can probably recite it by heart. So
that makes perfect sense. It makes I was wondering when I saw that, I was like, is Kevin gonna pick little Sheba for me or Andrew? I feel like it might happen.
Yeah, very Andrew. Yeah,
I love that so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the next is actually hard evidence of how positive an impact your series really, really is, because it finally got a good question out of Joey Gentile. And here it is.
It only took 4 years.
It only took all this time and 8,000 questions per episode. I love you, Joey, but I will drag you to hell and back. All right. And the runner-up becomes a horror movie with a cast of your guests. Who dies first? Who's the sole survivor? And who is the killer? And the guests are Ryan McQuaid, Joey Gentile, Baby Clyde, me, Sophia Simonello, Izzy, aka Be Kind Rewind, Brandon Stanwyck, and Thelma Adams. When
Thank you,
saw
Joey.
that, I was like, what is happening here?
Thelma Adams, the guest I had on the Best Picture series. That is really a true throwback for the people who have been, the OG listeners.
Yes.
Yes. Well, first of all, I don't know why I'm not involved in this at all. Seems rude, but anyway, I guess I'm just filming it all.
I guess.
I'm going to say that, Eric, you die first.
Oh my God.
Just a shocking sort of Drew Barrymore-esque death that is just like, oh my God, I didn't see that coming.
I hope I got a good paycheck.
Yes, you did. You're like first build on the poster. So, yeah. The killer is a deranged Joey Gentile who dresses as Karen Black when he kills.
It's incredible that Karen Black was still able to eke her way into this conversation. I was trying to avoid it at every turn, and here she is.
You're welcome. And the sole survivor is Sophia. She's the final girl.
Oh, I love it.
Yep. That's what happens.
I love.
Would love to see that. I love that cast. I think it would just be total chaos. You'd be at each other's throats, really. There wouldn't even need to be a killer.
Exactly. There you go. I think that is exactly right. Yeah. Oh my God, that's so funny. Okay. We love a good Paloma Diamond question in this house.
Yes,
and
we do.
Jim asks you to cast the following films with any Best Actress winner from the last, 97 years. The Face in the Mirror at the Back of the Room, Picture of the Soul, A Walk Along Jupiter Bay, The Remedy, Awake, Alone, and Aware on the Streets of Topeka, Kansas.
Wow. That was so beautifully read. All right. Well, here's what I came up with here. I'm going to go with Joan Crawford in The Face in the Mirror at the Back of the Room. I could see the faces now. Susan Hayward in Picture of the Soul, because, it was filmed on location inside a woman's soul. Greer Garson in A Walk Along Jupiter Bay, because it sounds boring. Glenda Jackson in The Remedy, because it sounds terrifying, and I would like to see that. And of course, Reese Witherspoon in Awake, Alone, and Aware on the Streets of Topeka, Kansas. I can hear it now, and I can see it now. I can see the makeup, and I can see her blonde hair, and I can see her wandering the streets.
10 out of 10, no notes.
Thank you.
Oh my God. Incredible. I love it. Diego AC asks, what were some of your favorite guest hot takes?
Oh, yes. We love a good hot take. I always respect when people go against the grain. I mentioned earlier Baby Clyde doing the whole Meryl and the Iron Lady thing, even though I completely disagree. I respect the defense of that. I don't know if this is like a super hot take, but I did really like Joyce in her semi-defense of Gwyneth Paltrow in Shakespeare in Love, because that is just a win that gets so shit on by so many people. And it was just nice to kind of not dive into the sort of toxicity of that. Just say that. I respect Joey's Quvenzhané Wallace love. I do like that, right?
Oh,
A
that's
rare
probably
Joey W.
yeah, that's where him and I probably align the closest of any belief whatsoever. I think it's one of the greatest nominations of all time.
Yeah. And then, of course, Fritz's love of Louise Reiner, which, was also kind of reinforced by another one of my guests, Samantha, way back in the day, who shouted her out as a favorite Best Actress winner, too. So you don't see many defenses of Louise Reiner. So, again, I just always really love when someone sticks their neck out and even just, goes again, just follows their heart, to quote Honora.
Oh, my God. Wow. That brings it around beautifully. Seth Austin Stool asks, what actress receiving a later stage nomination for a 7-minute performance a la Isabella Rossellini would excite you the most?
I mean, so many. But really, like, anyone who was a star in the 80s or 90s, truly. Because after Demi Moore, I'm just like, let's just see everyone, My first instinct here was Pam Grier.
Ugh.
I just need justice for what happened to her with Jackie Brown.
Yeah.
Period.
I would love that. Okay. All right. Now we're just going to be taking some crazy stabs in the dark here. So I hope it's not something that requires too much homework that you didn't do.
Okay.
Well, I mean, are you prepared for a Survivor question? Are you?
Yes.
Then let's go there, because
Okay.
we've already
Always
mentioned
prepared for
Shells,
Survivor.
and
Yes.
a Survivor comes up every time. So let's go.
Let's go.
From Shells, cast a season of Survivor with any of the nominees or winners and put them into 3 tribes. Who has the best social game? Who's the competition beast? Who manipulates everybody or is the best villain? And who wins?
Okay. Thank you very much, Chels. This allowed me to combine my true interests here and just totally geek out in a fan fiction. Okay, so we're going to split the tribes up by theme here. So I got my divas of a certain era on one tribe. So we got Glenn Close, Meryl Streep, Sigourney Weaver, Michelle Pfeiffer, Annette Bening, and Whoopi Goldberg.
Shit.
That's one tribe. My old Hollywood divas, Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, of course, Barbara Stanwyck, Ingrid Bergman, Olivia de Havilland, and Rosalind Russell. Let them go at it.
Let them.
And then some newer faves, Cate Blanchett, Michelle Yeoh, Jennifer Lawrence, Viola Davis, Kate Winslet, and Emma Stone.
All right. Okay. Yeah, that's amazing. Now let's get into who's got.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who's got game.
Yeah.
I think Meryl has a fantastic social game and can probably even bounce between those groups once they get to emerge. She's a very good actress. She could convince anybody that she's on their side, right? So I think Jennifer and Emma probably do too. They seem like good social butterflies, can hang well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Roz Russell, I think, would be fun to hang out with, from the old Hollywood group. Comp Beast is hard to say because, I don't know what era we're talking for some of them. I guess just them in their prime, perhaps, just kind of plucked out. And in that case, congrats, Michelle Yeoh. You're sweeping the comp wins, right? She does all her own stunts. So,
yeah,
she's very physically fit. She could probably kick anyone's ass, even in her 60s. So, there you go.
I think Viola Davis would give her a run for her money a little bit.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially post Woman King, I think.
That's sure. Exactly, yeah.
Yes. Who manipulates the best is tough because, these are all actresses we're talking about here, so like, there could be some deception there. But again, I think Meryl is like scary good at manipulating. I could just see that so easily. And Betty Davis, I think, is the biggest villain for sure of the whole season. She's the big bad.
Yeah.
Or maybe Olivia de Havilland too. That would be a fun, like, sneaky big bad.
I'm down for that.
Yeah. And the winner is Glenn Close because it's my fan fiction.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly. There isn't a who would get voted out first, but I'm going to ask you because I feel like I know of everyone you listed. I feel like I know who would get voted out first.
Really?
Or quit. Maybe
Not
on the first episode. Yes.
Oh no.
I have a theory.
Joan Crawford?
I don't know.
Maybe.
She does like walking on the beach.
Oh yeah.
I think that's true. I think that might.
I'm just scared in terms of her going up against Betty Davis. I just think Betty Davis just like rounds the troops up and gets a unanimous vote right then and there.
That I could see. I could see Joan not being able to curry any favor against the forcefulness of Betty Davis.
Yeah, but who did you have in mind? I'm so curious.
Oh, I think Whoopi Goldberg would be out first because she doesn't want to be there. She would get to the island and be like, why did I do this? Why am I here? And she would either quit or just be like, please vote me out.
A fair point.
I just want to be home.
Think of that. Yeah. She's such a fun personality. I just want to see her out there, even though I agree she'd probably be like, now how the hell, why am I here?
But see, that would be Whoopi Goldberg now. Whoopi Goldberg 1990, like winning the Oscar,
exactly.
Absolutely would have charmed the pants off of everybody and been super fun. And so that's right. Sort of like, to your point, what era are we talking about here?
Exactly.
Yes. Let's see. Let's take some stabs. Meryl questions, Katharine Hepburn questions. It's kind of there's a lot. There's a lot of these. Dave Guerin asks, should the Academy expand to a 6th nomination in most categories, considering the wealth of good options to choose from?
No. I'm happy with it just being 5. I think other awards have it covered with 6 or more at this point, Critics' Choice. So I like the exclusivity of the Oscars, just having that set 5. I think that just gives it more prestige, rather than have it be anyone who had a good performance gets nominated.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because once everyone kind of started doing that, Globes and Critics' Choice and everything, the focus really then became, who was 6th?
Yep.
And that is kind of overtaken like most of the regular conversation, unfortunately.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yep.
You've talked about your favorite Best Actress lineup of all time before, right?
I have referenced it.
All right.
I think we did earlier in the conversation.
Yeah,
maybe.
I thought we kind of did, but
74, I think.
Yeah,
is a big one.
Yeah, 74 being kind of like the one.
I'd also say 2006 is just like, that's one where, again,
that's right.
It was my year that I kind of got into the Oscars, so that just feels kind of formative for me.
Yes. So those were kind of questions from one person that we had sort of spoken about, but from Ian Daly. But he also asks, what is your most devastating winner snub that isn't Glenn Close?
There's been quite a few in recent years where the Academy has just kind of gone ahead and broken my heart. A lot of people have said this when I've asked the question about like heartbreaking losses, is that like, how do I separate it? Is it just overall, or is it just when I was watching the Oscars that I felt the heartbreaking loss of it all? So I was admittedly pretty heartbroken for both Lily Gladstone and Demi Moore back to back. I felt the devastation of both of those pretty hard because I was really rooting for both of them, honestly, and got invested in their award season narratives and all that, which I know is just a very tricky conversation for some people, is the idea of narratives invested in getting into all this. But anyway, that's one. Obviously, old school would be the standards, like Judy Garland for A Star Is Born, and yeah, That's the big one.
Yeah. Heather Stewart asks, so many actresses won for the wrong role, using Kate Winslet as an example. Which of the actresses with multiple nominations actually won for the right role?
I decided to look at actresses with like 4 or more nominations just to kind of narrow this down because
Yeah.
we'd be here forever. Greer Garson and Mrs. Miniver by default. Olivia de Havilland for The Heiress, certainly. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Elizabeth Taylor for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Katharine Hepburn for The Lion in Winter. Obviously, I honestly think Shirley MacLaine for Terms of Endearment is one for me as well. Yeah, and like Jane Fonda for Clute. Those are the big ones. Mostly the 70s, 80s ones for some reason. Just feel like they happened at the right time for their careers. I don't know why that is.
Yeah. So I love the that question and the phrasing of it because it does lead to a question from Jeffrey Kerr that says Katharine Hepburn once said that the right actors win Oscars, but for the wrong roles. In Best Actress alone, do you believe that's true more often than not?
Well, I mean, I haven't really done the specific math of that, but
yeah,
this sounds like I'm kind of sitting on the fence here, but I think it's probably half and half, honestly. Like, I don't think it's lopsided one way or the other. Like, I just listed quite a few that really did feel like they lined up well, but I don't know. Wrong roles, I think, is just too subjective for me to really be like too specific about it. I don't know.
Well,
it's hard to say.
I think it's sort of maybe is kind of leaning the way that Heather's question leaned directly on Kate Winslet of obviously being a great actor, but maybe this wasn't the role to win for, or Julianne Moore, great actress, better nominations in better films, wins for this, which just all brings us right back to every year is its own year.
Yes.
And that is the thing that matters. But more than anything. All right. Andrew Carden asks, in which year do you come closest to a 5-way tie? Personal choice, not a
right.
I mean, I think that's what he means by that. Looks like.
Yeah, I think so. And I kind of just would repeat what I said earlier, which is 1974 or 2006, where especially the latter, I'm just like, I don't know. I think Helen Mirren, Penelope Cruz, Judi Dench, Meryl Streep, and Kate Winslet probably all deserved Oscars for those performances. So give it to them all.
I love that. There's so many rating, comparison questions. There's so just it's a lot. There's a lot to choose from, and I don't want anyone to feel like I'm not picking them. All right, we did this. Gosh. Kevin McQueen asks, what are your top 5 nominated or winning What If There Was a Wife performances, and who wins an Oscar from this group?
Okay. Well, first of all, ironically, I would not actually classify Glenn Close in The Wife as this because it's all about her. So she's not supporting her own story. So that's just getting that out of the way first. So what I came up with here is actually a pretty good group. I would say Sharon Stone in Casino, Lee Remick in Days of Wine and Roses, Valerie Perrine in Lenny, someone from 1963, which people may be surprised by, but Rachel Roberts in This Sporting Life. That's cool. My old school pick. Yeah. And to throw it back to the original, Janet Gaynor in Sunrise. Just for you.
Hey, this podcast is over.
Anyway, my winner from that group would be Sharon Stone, because that is truly a case for me of someone just acting the shit out of a role and muscling her way into the lead category by sheer force of will.
It is a phenomenal example of that.
Yeah, I think so.
Especially when we've seen so many that have done quite the opposite and just sort of hobble their way in. Ashley Grady, who are your top 10 runners up in Best Actress? Multiples from a year, no ranking required.
Oh, yes. I did come up with a list here. Okay. Well, recently, Cate Blanchett in Tar, Glenn Close and The Wife, maybe not in terms of performance, but as an iconic runner-up that only I would mention, I think that has to be there. Glenn Close again in Dangerous Liaisons. Sorry, that's the last Glenn. Brenda Blethyn in Secrets and Lies. Mary Tyler Moore in Ordinary People. Bette Midler in The Rose. Whoopi Goldberg in The Color Purple. Judy Garland in A Star Is Born. Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard. And Barbara Stanwyck in Stella Dallas. Those are the ones for me.
Oh, Barbara.
Right?
God,
Always Barbara.
That year. Oh,
heartbreaking.
It was quite
Sorry,
a
Fritz.
year. Yeah, it really, I mean, it was on my list as like, this is like one of, sorry, Fritz, like worst winners against who they were nominated.
Who they beat.
Oof.
Yep.
It's brutal. All right. This is such a kooky question.
Great.
So I kind of have to ask it from Dakesh Valentine. If we were to send another Voyager out into space with evidence of humanity, I don't know, is this a Sandra Bullock question?
Yes.
Which 5 winning performances would you include to best represent the life of human women?
What a big question.
It's a lot, Kevin.
Hard to even know how to approach that, right? So I went with Sally Field and Norma Ray.
Ooh.
You know, good underdog story. Hopeful. Shirley MacLaine in terms of endearment. The life of being a mother. All its ups and downs. Sophia Loren in Two Women, I think, is another one that I think speaks to a very human type of thing. Holly Hunter in The Piano to show, I mean, that's something that doesn't have any spoken language, obviously. I feel like that can very easily translate to another species, perhaps. And probably Julia Roberts and Erin Brockovich, just to let them have fun, you know?
I like that.
How about that?
That's cool.
I don't know.
They're just getting sent out into space for alien life to watch.
Yeah, be charmed by the $1 million smile of Julia Roberts.
And maybe not blow us up.
Right. That's, you know, Julia Roberts' smile is one of our best exports, I think.
Exactly. Oh, I like that. Ray says, and also mentions that the Best Actress in the Best Picture series helped him with his thesis, which is great. What was the best decade overall for you to cover, either for the nominees, the sequence of winners, or the era of Hollywood and abroad?
The best for me was the 70s. I love that era, and I think that was just a decade where we had a lot of really, really great discussions. Honestly, that was a decade where I felt like I was really hitting my stride and kind of becoming more of a well-oiled machine, I guess. I don't know. And I just love that era anyway. So I think the passion was felt.
I think so too. I love that. I think you're right. It was really kind of the convergence of you absolutely kind of getting and owning your own show. And then it was also the decade where everything broke free. All the restraints from the 70, 60 years prior were gone. So anything could happen. And it was certainly a decade where anything did as a result.
And so many all-timers that decade, I think.
Absolutely. Even with, multiple double winners,
right?
It still ended up, being that way. I just don't want to get too repetitive. We've gotten a little bit, and that's my fault, kind of.
No, it's fine.
Kind of rehashing a lot of similar years and questions, and I don't want to.
Yes. If we have talked about anything that people who ask questions feel they also asked, there you go.
And if they're not, maybe Kevin can do a Substack and answer the rest of all these questions. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay. Giving me homework.
Fritz asks a very general question here. Which German guest was your favorite?
So hard. Such a tough pick. I love all my German friends equally, so I don't want to do a Sophie's Choice for them necessarily.
Not Sophie's Choice in Germany.
Too soon. Too dark. No, I love both Fritz and Christoph equally.
What a wonderfully unbiased question, and I'm so glad that
Totally.
that Fritz
Yeah,
threw that out there.
of course. Love you, Fritz. And Christoph.
Oh, okay. This is kind of interesting. I like this. James Stewart Stan account. You
Hmm.
believe that a great director can bring a great performance, even from a not so talented actress, or must she have her own magic, even if it's hidden or unknown to herself?
Wow. It's a very philosophical question there.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I think it can be multiple things. I think there probably has to be a baseline of skill there and at least a willingness to stretch and to grow. But yeah, I think a great director can definitely recognize how to bring that out of actors who may not be at like the Meryl Streep level, even for someone who hasn't acted before. Like we mentioned before, Prevention A. Wallace with, Ben Zeitlin definitely knew how to bring out her individual strengths.
I like that.
So the answer is both.
Yes, you're doing a lot of fence riding
I know it's just
today,
it's
Kevin. It's all right. It's all right.
from now on I'm going to make very hard nose opinions.
Well,
So watch
I'm
out,
not. I'm
everybody.
not. I'm not. I'm not pressuring you too much. I'm just,
I mean, you kind of are,
Am
but
I?
go on.
All right.
Yeah, a little bit. Leading the
um,
witness.
the fence was wrong. Okay. Yeah, that's
Very good.
All right, just rewatch that.
Yep.
Emily
Mm-hmm.
Nesbitt asked, "What's a win that you loved more on revisit, and one that wasn't as great in hindsight?" Love this question.
Yes. I feel like watching Sophia Loren in Two Women again really made her go like way up in my rankings. Not that I thought she was like average or anything before, but she really, really moved me on the rewatch. One that wasn't as great in hindsight was to go back to 1984, Sally Field in Places in the Heart. Like, she's fine, but it's nowhere near an Oscar caliber performance for me. And that's why I didn't even give her my win for that year.
Yeah, what was it about Sophia Loren that raised your esteem?
Just the emotive power of her face, I think, was really what did it. And I think that's a big part of why it sort of crossed barriers, really, and had Hollywood respond to it too. It's just this universal language of what she was able to display with her grief in that film and the anguish. Yeah.
Levi asks, "We see a lot of different archetypes in Best Actress: Stars Born, Odoo Veteran, Comeback Queen. What is your favorite kind of Best Actress nominee or winner?"
Okay. For me, it's almost always some combination of the overdue veteran or the comeback queen. I am fully done with the Star is Born phase. I'm over it. You
Sorry,
know,
Mikey Madison.
sorry, Mikey Madison. She's third for me in that lineup. Uh, I know people might hate this on Twitter and other places, but there's just something for me that is irresistible about an older star that's back and that is still killing it. And I think there should be more respect given to those actors who are, in my opinion, often labeled as driven by narrative and not the performance itself, which bothers me. I saw that a lot with Demi Moore this past year, saying, well, if it's just the performance, then Mikey's going to win. But if it's narrative, it's going to be Demi. Demi had rave reviews since Cannes and, was hailed as the best performance of her career. And now we're just going to sort of talk about how it's just about, oh, she's back now and we just want to see her win.
I think
It's very dismissive and it's bothered me since Glenn Close and The Wife.
yes, it becomes very, very reductive, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a conversation that only happens in the actress categories. This
Correct.
this really never happens for actors, because it's actually flipped, where that narrative is a positive attribute versus a
Mm-hmm.
negative trait.
Yeah.
And that comes from any number of us talking about actresses, whether we are in the alphabet mafia or not, but it is definitely unique and specific in a very intentional or unintentionally misogynistic way.
I think it's ageist,
It's also
honestly.
very ageist, yes.
Yeah. Yep.
But on the flip side of that, I think because if I'm offering my opinion, and I am, I agree with you. I love that too.
Hmm.
And that
Yeah.
goes back to just, my love of older actresses and just being, an absolute gold star, dyed in the wool gay. It just sort of comes with it. Uh,
Yeah.
these are the women that, I would literally like look to as not a role model, but as the definition of a woman, that
Yeah.
specific struggle. Yeah.
Yes. These are the women who raised us,
Thank you. Exactly.
and we should put respect on their name.
That is what the phrase I was looking for a second, and I
Perfect.
blanked. So thank you.
Okay.
I love
Yes.
that.
Now I'm fired up. Let's go. What else you
Yes.
got for me?
Um, we're actually getting through quite a lot of these, and I'm pretty happy. Jeremy Kaplan says my question is broad, so maybe I don't know. Let's see how broad it is. How has this whole experience of viewing all these movies changed you as a film watcher and as a person? And Malice doesn't live here anymore. Asked, how has this series changed you as a cinephile?
Yeah, it is very broad. I think I think it really made me kind of just razor sharp in being able to notice an actress's choices in their performance, and also to be able to articulate that beyond good performance, bad performance, you know? And I've been very proud, I think, of the discussions that we've had with riding the line between broad and specific, with what makes a performance good or bad, or somewhere in between, which is often the case. And that somewhere in between thing is something that is frequently becoming lost in today's film discussion. And I think there needs to be more of that in terms of recognizing both the good and bad aspects of a performance, where I may not like, for example, Meryl Streep in The Iron Lady, but I can still recognize some of the positives in that in terms of the amount of work she put into truly transforming there. So,
I like that.
mhm.
Marcel asks, and this will be in connection with Amanda BW. What film are you most happy to never have to sit through again, and why is it The Great Ziegfeld? And then the second part is, if you continue this project in another category, are there any movies that you would just refuse to watch again?
Cimarron,
Word.
period.
Period.
That's the big one.
Yeah. It
Or like Cavalcade.
was a rough
I can't
era.
do it anymore. I can't do it. Don't make me do it. People.
Oh, this is actually, since we're kind of on this extremely early years of the Oscars, I want to sort of dip back to the very, very beginning about these rewatches and accessibility of some of these films. What's been not necessarily the most obviously, late 20s and early 30s are going to be a really difficult period to find some of these films, but what's been the best avenue for you to find things, and has there been any episode where you were not able to rewatch something?
I always found a way, and you can take from that whatever you may. There are certain websites that have certain films that are not available to officially stream, or they're not even on home media. So some of them have been a struggle, especially those early years. And actually, literally the very first year, trying to find A Ship Comes In from Louise Dresser was like a Herculean task. And I ultimately found a way. Uh, so there's that. But also, go to your local library because they have so many DVDs that, you know, you might not even find certain movies on streaming. Like, for example, Silkwood, which for a long time was not even streaming anywhere, but my local library had a DVD of that. So please go to your local libraries. It's free movies. So there you go.
Yeah, and you can even on Canopy too with your library card. You can watch it at
Yeah,
home as well because
right. Canopy or Hoopla if you have that, which I
yeah,
have.
there are options. But yeah, I imagine that had to
Yeah.
be difficult, and then difficult for your guests too that wanted to do
Yes.
those seasons.
Yeah. I mean, literally, like 1977 was weirdly really difficult because Julia wasn't available and The Turning Point wasn't available. So, like, 3 of the 5 nominees are already like, okay, what do I do? But
That
we found a way, me and Chelsea.
exactly. Oh my god, I keep passing up the farm lady question, which is so funny. Maybe I should just ask it, but I'm not going
Just
to.
do it.
All right, Christoph asks, without refreshing your memories, tell me the plots of the 3 farm lady movies and how they were distinct from each other.
This was the only one I didn't prepare for
Oh
because
no!
I wanted to.
See?
No, I mean, like, I didn't want to refresh my memory at all.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So, Places in the Heart. I'll start there. Sally Field. I believe her husband dies. Seems right. And now she's a widow, and she gets the help from other people in her community to keep up with the farm in order to not have it go back to the government, something like that. And then at the end, they're all in the church, and there's dead people there who we saw earlier in the film, and they're all hand in hand, and hallelujah.
They like her. They really liked her.
They do, and they did, and they will forever. Country, Jessica Lange, Sam Shepard, hottest couple of the 80s. They have a farm, and they, I think, are just literally just trying to make sure their farm isn't foreclosed on. And I genuinely don't remember anything else that happens. Literally at all. So there's that. And then The River with Sissy Spacek. What if there was a river? For some reason, they have a farm that is really close to a river, which feels like a disaster waiting to happen. Her and Mel Gibson. I think Scott Glenn is involved somewhere, and he kind of wants their farm, maybe? Or he wants the land, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And she is a true example of what if there was a wife. Like, my goodness, I felt bad watching Sissy Spacek have to be a wife to Mel Gibson in that movie. So, I don't know. I hope some of that was close.
That's it. All sounds exactly right, and so I'll just say that it is.
I truly have completely memory holed Country. Like, I just, like, what even is that movie? I don't know.
Well, I mean, obviously it's a funny question meant to imply that they're all basically the same, and
they are the same.
They really are. Again,
yep.
It was the era of the farm girl. All right. We have some similar questions from John T and Sean. Is there any girly you feel bad not to be able to give the win to because of tough competition or the lineup?
Well, speaking of which, Jessica Lange, who I had 5 opportunities to give a win to, but I just never thought she was the best in her lineup, so it just never happened. In my universe, Jessica Lange is the Glenn Close of that. Very overdue.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one would be Irene Dunn, which pained me that I couldn't give that to her for the awful truth, but I just couldn't deny Barbara Stanwyck and Stella Dallas. But yeah, she's one of my faves of the old era. Those are the 2.
Yeah. Greg Adams asks, which actress have you come to the conclusion has been the runner-up the most times?
Yeah, I mean, this has to be Meryl by default, I think, just because no one else had the opportunity to be a runner-up that many times. I mean, what I said on the show would be 4 times for her, which is 1981, French Lieutenant's Woman, 2006, Devil Wears Prada, 2008, Doubt, and 2009, Julie and Julia.
Yeah. Yeah, just by virtue of numbers alone.
Right.
And since we're only talking about lead actress, so.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, we'll see if she comes back for Devil Wears Prada 2. Not happening.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, congrats on your Golden Globe, Meryl.
There you go. Just like for the first one.
Exactly. Matt Duffy asks, what's been your favorite year and nomination to discuss? I feel like if it's 74, I'm just gonna be like, all right, I'm just asking the same question. But
it's 74.
Oh, there we are again. That's all right.
I just feel like me and Sophia, we just really got in depth with each of those, especially with Jenna Rollins in A Woman Under the Influence, which is my number one performance that I discussed on the show.
Yeah.
But I also had fun covering some of the more like unusual nominations, like previously mentioned, Anne Margaret and Tommy, or like Sally Kirkland and Anna, or more recently Andrea Riseborough and To Leslie. Like, I love all those quirkier ones,
Yeah. Liam asks, do you think anyone will match Meryl's record, or is it just too difficult and too much competition for actresses to rack up nominations like that now?
I don't think anyone ever will. At least for the time being. Again, we're really in an era of rewarding newer people, or meaning newer people to the Academy, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, again, there are like so many actresses who could have just added to their nomination totals this past year, like Nicole Kidman or Kate Winslet, Amy Adams, and they all just got pushed out in favor of, more exciting, newer faces to the Academy. And I think that might maybe continue for a while, but
I think that's a good point. I think this year is maybe more than any this decade an example of that, of the willingness to turn away a Kidman and Angelina Jolie that felt like should have been absolute like locked in, but
right, not anymore.
No, not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're getting to close to a close of this.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people want to know what you want to do or are going to do next when and if you decide to continue this series. You don't have to answer it, but if you want to, is this going to be a break, or is it a building to the next?
I will just say I already have a plan in place for the next phase of me as a podcaster. All I'm going to tease about it right now, I'm not making an announcement right now, but that will come very soon, is that what I'm doing next is not directly related to the Oscars.
Okay. All right. That's actually a really good scoop.
Yeah, which is a slight departure, but once people know what that is, they will perhaps understand. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
I know we also got a question about whether I might do a supporting actress podcast.
Yes.
Which many people have demanded in some cases. Not even like asking, am I going to do it? Saying like, you should do it.
Yeah, when's it happening? It's like asking Rihanna for a new album.
Yes. I am not ruling that out. It's something I may probably do down the line, but that is not what is coming next. I need a little bit of a break in between. It's like a gap year for me.
Yes. No,
I'll just say that.
I love that. I think that's good. And it's probably very healthy for just your mental health to do.
For me and my personal life. Yes.
Absolutely. Self-care.
Yeah.
Well, I want to close with I'm going to be RuPaul for a second here. And
oh dear.
You're a queen on the stage, as you are right now. So when she holds up the photos of the queens and asks, what would you say to 10-year-old Kevin today?
Oh, That's very sweet. I think I would just say to not think that what you're interested in right now is stupid or that you are just an outcast who, will never make other friends who care about what you care about. Because there are many, many, many people out there, even more than I ever could have imagined, who are interested in what you are also interested in and are interested in your voice. Because, another thing with me is that I was a very introverted kid growing up, and I've really kind of expanded more in my adulthood as a person, I think. And some of that may have just been feeling like I didn't really belong anywhere when I was younger. And so to just know that there will be a space for me that I can carve out myself, I think that is what I would say.
Yeah. And you have a tribe.
Yeah, and the tribe has spoken.
That's really bringing all the universes together at once.
Right? Yes.
Kevin, this has been such an honor that you asked me to do this. I am just overwhelmed by how much people love the show and love you, and how much you've given to everybody with it, because it's a lot. It's an enormous amount of your life that you're doing for yourself, but for so many people. And again, as evidenced by all of the comments across all platforms, yeah, I can speak for everybody in just giving you all the love possible for this show.
Thank you, Erik.
Yeah.
Again, you're always you're always such a sweetie when you come on this show and you say these things. I really do appreciate it. It does make me feel loved. Thank you, life. Thank you, love.
Exactly. Yes. Very
It
much.
is true. There are some angels in this podcast space. I don't know.
And with that, I will hand it back to you.
Okay. Well, again, thank you. I just wanted to say, where could people find more of you on the internet if they want more of your you-ness?
You of my you-ness. Oh no. Yes, sure. Come to awardswatch.com. Find me slinking around Twitter making absolutely horrible comments.
Nice.
Or Letterboxd, Instagram at AwardsWatch.
Very good. Yes, please follow Erik. He is truly one of the best in the biz. Yes. Okay. Thank you all so much for listening. Again, this has been such a fun experience that I have truly loved more than anything that I've ever done in this space. And I just want to thank all my guests again that I've had on over the years, especially my repeat guests, such as yourself, for just putting in the work too, because this is not an easy task guesting on And the Runner-Up Is, as many have pointed out to me both lovingly and from a place of terror. So I really do appreciate all the work that everyone has put in to make these fun and very thorough conversations with me about this thing that we all love and sometimes love to hate. But either way, there is passion there. And I love that. So with that, you can find me at Kevin_Jacobson on all socials, just Kevin Jacobson with no underscore on Blue Sky. Podcast is at Oscar Runner-Up on Twitter, and The Runner-Up is on Instagram and Blue Sky. And you can hear more of me at patreon.com/andtherunnerup_is, where I will still be doing some bonus episodes starting in April. Stay tuned for the announcement of the next phase, perhaps coming in a few weeks. And with that, for the final time this series, I will bid you all adieu.